Good evening, everyone. Um, we welcome all of you to the EI Asset Misconception series. We are truly delighted to have teachers across the country. On your screen, you can see the poster highlighting the dates of the upcoming session. Uh, all are designed to help you through the practical classroom insight. As this is the day two, we will be taking a closer look at some of the common misconceptions students experience, particularly in English, grade 7 to 10. Let me begin with a quick reflection. How often do we notice students making the same language error even after repeated correction? Takes. They often signal underlying misconceptions that shape how students understand English. In today's session, we will focus on uncovering these misconceptions commonly seen in grades 7 to 10. Most importantly, we will explore what errors reveal about students' thinking, and how we as educators can respond to promote their learning. By the end of the hour, we should be able to recognize the patterns more clearly and help them get better accuracy and student confidence. Before we dwell into the session, I am Pooja Kapoor, currently working as a senior academic consultant. I bring a decade of experience in education sector with a strong focus on student assessment and learning. And here with me, co-hosting this session is Madhurima Datta. Ms. Datta, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Pooja. Hello, everyone. I am Madhurima Datta, and I am currently working as a lead educational specialist in EI. I have a journalism degree, and I've been working in the education sector for the past 6 years. And I specialize in assessment research. Both of us work for a leading edtech organization called Educational Initiatives. EI is a 23-year-old company with a vision to create a world where every student learns with deep understanding. Our vision stands on three key pillars, which is pedagogical research, leveraging technology to scale, and the science of learning. Together, we believe that these three elements guide our mission to transform learning experiences for our students. The flagship program of EI is ASSET, which you may be familiar with. ASSET is a skill-based diagnostic assessment that helps schools diagnose learning gaps and by analyzing students' understanding at a deeper level. It gives teachers a clearer picture of what their students need so they can focus on the areas that matter the most, right? So ASSET has been taken in various schools for the last 23 years, and every year more than 10 lakh students take the test. So what are we going to do here today? So today we will dive into the misconceptions that were diagnosed by ASSET 2025, the winter round. Over the next 50-ish minutes, our agenda will cover the following key points. So first, we'll try to understand what are misconceptions, right? Then we're going to discuss why is it crucial to identify and resolve these misconceptions. And last but not the least, the main part is we're going to explore some common misconceptions with very specific examples.
Thank you, Madhurima, for setting the agenda. Now, let me set the context. I think we all will agree that English is a scholastic subject. It lies in the heart of language development and communication. Skills that rely on not only in English classroom, but students need it for other subjects also. And that is precisely why English is unique. Now, English stands apart from subjects like mathematics and science. While those disciplines are largely concept driven, English is fundamentally skill based. Now, grammar we feel most concept driven when you talk about, but when you talk about skills like comprehension, vocabulary, they all do not depend on memorizing rules, but application of it. And that is why language learning is developmental rather than specific grade. So as the student goes from classes 4 to 10th, we don't expect them to introduce to new skills. What we are expecting them is a depth of understanding and more precise expressions. There is more in the there's another important difference that is about in both the subjects is math subjects like mathematics and science focus on correct application and arriving at the right answer. While in English, the focus shifts to effective communication. How appropriately was the child able to convey their thoughts? While maths and science prioritize the correct application, English prioritizes the correct usage. It's not about being right, but it's about being communicating meaningfully. And for us as educators, it's important to go beyond the retention and think about the skill building. Because when students develop strong language skills, they do not just perform better in English, but also across the other subjects. And this brings us to a very important question. If English is about building skills, what happens when those skills do not develop as expected? What do we really mean by the word misconception? Just take a minute and write in the Q&A sections, what does the word misconceptions mean to you? You can write in the Q&A section.
Okay. We have some responses: gap in understanding of a concept, doubt, unclear, assumption.
Right.
Misunderstanding, incorrect notion.
Thank you, teachers. Thank you for sharing your
Okay.
perspective. As many of you have rightly pointed out, that misconceptions come out from the flawed understanding or the incorrect assumptions. Language is language also works the same way, that they have not applied skills that should be applied. Now, these are not random mistakes, they reflect students' thinking pattern. Now, let us look at how misconceptions typically appear in our everyday classrooms. First, students often learn ed needs to be added to make a verb past tense. As a result, you would have seen them writing words like goad instead of went. This is an example of inaccurate prior knowledge when the rule has been overgeneralized. Second, I'm sure you would have seen that in your notebooks that students want to use complex or advanced vocabulary to improve their writing. But using these words inaccurately or without considering the context, they would often uh, use it in the wrong context because they know the word, but they don't know how to use it. So the context is not very clear to them. Third, we also see students getting confused between concepts like adjectives and adverbs. And we will see them writing, she sings beautiful instead of beautifully. Now, this reflects an incorrect understanding of the foundational concept itself, where the concept is not fully understood. Finally, in reading comprehensions, you might also see students applying the wrong strategy. For instance, when the question requires them to summarize or infer, they may start visualizing or recalling the surface details, which leads to responses that miss the intent of the question. This issue is not language accuracy, but this is about using the incorrect strategy for answering the question. Recognizing these steps is the first step to removing any misconception from the classroom. With that context, Madhurima, could you please help us that how do we do that in EI? How do we differentiate between a misconception and an error?
Yes, thank you, Pooja. So at EI, we identify these misconceptions through carefully designed multiple choice questions in ASSET, right? So in ASSET, you must have seen we only have multiple choice questions. And each option that a question has is not random. Every incorrect choice, every incorrect option is designed very specifically to catch a very specific misconception, right? To understand students' incorrect way of thinking. So when we see that around 20 to 40% of students they have selected the same incorrect answer, it can tell us that it's not an error if like a big group of students, which is around 20 to 40% student, they're selecting the same incorrect answer. It's not a careless mistake, it is a misconception. So this allows us to have data to rely on and to move beyond marking answers as right or wrong and instead diagnose the underlying skill gap that the students might have and then plan accordingly.
Thank you, Madhurima.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to ask teachers, why do they think these misconceptions are happening? Please use the Q&A box. Madhurima.
Yeah, we have one answer, fallacies. Do we have anybody else? Why, what do we think are where do these misconceptions come from? Like, where are students getting these misconceptions from? Learning gaps, um, when they're exposed to incorrect usage verbally, maybe, thank you, Shweta ma'am, maybe you because of use of prior knowledge, right? Great. I think we are kind of getting to exactly what are some of the sources of misconception.
Right.
Um,
So, Madhurima, would you like to take us through?
yes. So, like you said, believe it or not, some of the sources of misconception can be as simple as not giving feedback. For example, let's say the student takes a test. They select some correct answers, they select some incorrect answers, then they get their report cards, they go back home, and everybody moves on, right? What we sometimes fail to do is address the incorrect answers or the reason behind the students selecting those particularly incorrect answers. Like, what were they thinking? Like, when they, let's say, read a passage and then they answered a question, what exactly went on in their brain? So just showing the students ki, okay, this was the passage, this was the question, this was the correct answer, and this is what you selected can actually help address a lot of student misconception. Like giving proper feedback to students, discussing their answers with them, trying to understand what they were thinking, helps solve for major source of misconception.
Right. And Madhurima, what if these misconceptions are there before the test also?
True, right. So this is what I think Shweta ma'am mentioned that another source that we also something that we discussed earlier was when students come to a class with their own thoughts and own understandings of a topic, right? We will get more into this when we're discussing the levels of misconception. And so basically, when they have their own understanding of a topic, these understandings or these preconceived notions might not just go away if we introduce them to a new kind of topic, right? So when we introduce them to the correct version of the topic. So what we very consciously as educators we need to do is we need to weed out these incorrect assumptions from the student's brain. So it needs to be a very conscious effort. Yeah. All right. So now that we have kind of established what are misconceptions, what are some of its sources, let's talk about why are misconceptions important? Like, why should we even explore them? And if we are doing it, how can they help us as educators, right? So, what do you, teachers, what do you think? Why do you think student, like, it's important to explore misconceptions? Like, how will exploring misconceptions as a whole help us? You can use the Q&A box to write your responses. So that we avoid repeated mistakes, right? So that they can understand their mistakes in a better way, to gain better understanding, help them understand the text, get to the root of the issue. Yes, correct. Pooja, would you like to take us through? I think teachers kind of get the kind of gist of it. Would you like to take us through why should we explore misconceptions?
I think we have got a gist of it, but I would
Hmm.
like to say that It's more to that. We have one more layer to it, that misconceptions, as you have said correctly, that they're not common patterns of incorrect thinking and they're different from
Mm.
simple errors. It's not that students are making one error, and errors are basically individual and they can go student by student. But when we are talking with English educators who are teaching classes of 30 to 40 students and every student is making mistake, it's not very much possible to correct every child's problem, every child's
Mm.
mistake. So, in order, in the limited time that we have, the best way is to understand why do students come up with these misconceptions? What were they thinking? And also to design to design proper remediated strategies which are not isolated. So the impact is very well chosen and it's not on handful students but at a larger scale, because we are saying that these misconceptions are seen by most of the students together. It's not isolated in that way.
Yeah.
So now that we have understood that why it is important for us to look at the misconceptions and distinguish them from errors, it's even more effective when we are talking about why is it important in English. I think Madhurima, you will have to help us take us through why do we have to look at misconception in English specifically.
Right. Thank you, Pooja. So, studies have actually shown that students who perform well on standardized English exams, let's say like TOEFL or IELTS, tend to have higher GPAs because competency in English doesn't just impact language tests, right? It affects how students perform in all subjects. Like, think about it this way: a student who is struggling with comprehension in an English test might also struggle to understand a science question, or like let's say they have a math word problem. The skill, which is comprehension, will hinder their ability to perform in an English test, but also in a science or math or social science question. If they don't fully grasp what's written in a question, they will not be able to apply their knowledge correctly. And this is why recognizing and addressing misconceptions in English is so powerful. Because when we correct these misunderstandings, we are not just improving their English skills, we're improving their ability to learn and perform across subjects. Because students need to read in English to understand these subjects, right? All English educators can agree with the idea that if students enhance their language learning skills and develop the ability to comprehend what they are learning, it will undoubtedly have a positive impact on their performance across all subjects, right? Pooja, would you like to take us through the categorization of misconception in English?
Right. So for AI asset, what we do is we have three segregations of reading comprehension, grammar, and vocabulary. However, for today's session, we will be taking examples of three from reading comprehension, two from grammar, and one from vocabulary. So let's dive into reading comprehension, which is a very critical and most important language learning skill for us. So it's not just about reading the passages or sentences or paragraphs, right? You all would agree to this. It's about understanding and interpreting the text, especially when we are talking about grade 7 to 10. So to do this kind of reading, students naturally use some reading strategies. On screen, you can see a few examples of them. Not all of these are taught to the students explicitly, but students learn them over the time while they're reading. Students know how to use. Students Now, misconceptions do not arise because students do not have these strategies. It arises because students are not using these strategies correctly. The issue is with the context. Problem occurs when students apply wrong strategy to a particular question. For example, if we are asking students to infer the student character's motivation and students start locating the keywords, so that's a different problem. We also see that students, when we are asking them to look for visualizing, they will start looking for the details. So in next section, Madhurima will help us understand what are the different level of misconceptions in reading comprehension and how do they help or influence the students to respond, what responses do students produce in the EI asset test.
Right. Thank you, Pooja. So this framework that you see on your screen is called Levels of Distractors or Incorrect Options, and this was published in 2004 by Pearson's, which breaks down misconceptions into three distinct levels, and then your fourth level is basically the correct answer. So, level one includes students who over rely on their prior knowledge when they're answering questions associated with the text. These are students who are grabbing bits and pieces of the text. Instead of comprehending the text in front of them, they're thinking of what they already know about the topic, right? So let's take an example, right? So if it's a passage on bees and their role in pollination, they don't know much about pollination. They don't know much about how bees facilitate pollination, but they know about bees. These students will think about what they already know about bees. Let's say the fact that they collect nectar, they make hives, they provide us with honey, and they will use that information to answer questions rather than reading or comprehending the text in front of them. So, students who struggle with reading fluency or vocabulary knowledge are usually the ones who are most likely to rely on prior knowledge to answer the question. The second one, which is level two, is when students have read the passage. They have a basic understanding of what is happening in the passage and they can tell us what the main idea is. But they cannot tell us what the author's message is or why a character made a certain choice. Let's think of a story here. Okay, so everybody here knows the story of the hare and the tortoise, right? So let's say students have read the story and they can tell us basic facts from the story, which is the hare ran fast, the tortoise walked slow, the hare slept, the tortoise kept going and won. But if you ask, why did the tortoise win? Or what is the lesson? They might say, because the hare slept. They stop there. They are not connecting the main message, which is like the main conclusion of the story, to deeper ideas like persistence, effort, or overconfidence. They're just repeating details from the story without actually interpreting them, right? So, what they have done is a very basic, literal surface level comprehension. And they are stuck there at that level. These students are not able to do a deeper analysis of the text. Now, level three is when students have understood the text properly, right? And they have done an analysis, but they have made a mistake in analyzing it. Maybe they have located the incorrect elements, but have made the correct connection, or maybe they have selected the right elements, but they have failed to make the correct connection between the two elements that they have picked. Now, those are students who have a level three misconception. So, if you take the same hare and the tortoise story example, students who have a level three misconception do analyze and infer, but they connect the ideas incorrectly or they are overgeneralizing it, right? So their thinking goes beyond the surface, but it goes slightly off track. So let's say if you ask them, what do you learn from the story? The student might say, the lesson is that being fast is bad. They notice that the hare lost and they try to interpret the message but they drew the wrong conclusion. Or they might say the tortoise won because slow animals are better than fast animals. They're picking up the details and attempting an inference, but they're misinterpreting what the actual author's message is. So, at this level, the thinking is there and analysis is happening. It's just misdirected, right? So, this framework it's possible that it's a little new and the information is a little kind of it could be a little overwhelming, but hopefully we're going to go through some very specific examples from the acid winter round, and hopefully that will kind of solidify your understanding on how we categorize misconceptions in like level one, two, and three. Okay. So for the first example, we have a grade 8 reading comprehension question based on the poem Don't Quit. And the skill being assessed here is analyzing characters and situations. Pooja, would you like to tell us what the poem is about a little bit?
Yeah. So this is about talking about moments when things are really difficult and when progressing becomes very slow and giving up is very tempting. So this is
Mhm.
encouraging the readers, as it says in the title itself, that don't quit and keep going because success might not seem near, but it will eventually fall up. So
Right. Thank you, Pooja. So now let's take a look what the question is asking, right? The question asks us that the poet mainly talks about which two aspects of life. And students were given four options, which is joys and sorrows, suffering and regret, trials and triumphs, the beginning and the end, right? So now, throughout the poem, the poet tells us about challenges such as failure and death, hardship placed alongside images of success, winning, reaching the goal, and finally seeing things turn around. So, obviously, the correct answer is option C. So, we see throughout the poem, kind of, the poet is repeating this message. But let's look at the data now. The correct answer was selected by only 45% of the students, right? Almost 23% students selected option A, which is joys and sorrows. But does the poem say anything about joys and sorrows? No, which means students who selected this option have most likely relied on their general idea of what life is about. They may think life is a mix of positive and negative experiences, but instead of describing hardship, they assume it correlating the two. So, what students did here is instead of answering the question based on the text, instead of reading the text, understanding the text, they applied their own prior knowledge about what they think life is about to answer the question. So, this is an example of level one misconception, where students are not reading the text, they're reading only the question and answering based on what they think they know about what the question is asking. Okay, so we'll move on to another example. This is a grade 10 question based on the short story The Open Window. Here, the skill that is being assessed is understanding the organization and context of the passage and essentially how the author puts the story together. So, I'll just give you a very brief overview of the story. The story follows this person called Frampton Nuttall, who is visiting the rural countryside and he does not know anyone there. So he goes to the house of a lady who his sister recommended, but the lady isn't there. He finds his niece. And the niece kind of tells Frampton a very disturbing story about a tragic accident that happened to the family members, which is why her aunt leaves the window open in hope that the dead family members would return. Now, later towards the story, we find that the story that the niece tells is not true at all. It has been deliberately made up, and we get to know that this is something the niece often does, right? So, the question we asked was which of these has the author used to construct the plot? And the options were irony, deceit, adventure, and exaggeration. So, before we jump to the data, think about what is doing the real work here in constructing the plot of the story, right? Let's have a quick poll, right? Can we have the first poll? So, what do you think the correct answer is? We'll You can take some time. We'll give you around 45-ish, 30 to 45 seconds to answer this. What do you think the correct answer is? Pooja, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, most of the teachers have gone with option B and D. So there's a tie over there.
Mm.
However, 24% have followed with A also. Very less going to C.
Yeah.
So I think it's D and A, which most of the teachers have gone for. Let's look at the right answer.
It's option B, deceit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the correct answer is deceit. Um, so Denise, should I take it up?
Yeah,
That
yeah, go ahead.
okay. So here, why do we think deceit is the right answer? Is because the niece story was what drives everything that happens. It's his fear, the buildup of the tension, and his reaction at the end. Without this act, this plot wasn't there, and 30% of students though have answered. Can we see how students have answered this? Yeah, 30% of students have answered this correctly. But a large group of students have also spread their choices across irony, adventure, exaggeration, approximately 20 to 25%. Now, if we listen or we read the passages carefully, we come to know that all of them make sense. Like you have also gone for option A.
Mm.
Because at first, when we are looking at option A, that looks very simple to us as it's probably the ending, the last line itself, which has been there, which says that Phantom believes in the tragic story, panics, and when he sees the men returning and runs away, while we see the readers later realize that this was all made up. So they think that the story is ironic in nature, and that is why students have gone for that. But irony is not the effect of the plot, it's not what the author has used in the very first place. But when we see that students have also gone with options like adventure, though most of the teachers did not feel this was the right answer, but students have thought of it because of the most
Mm.
dramatic imagery, the hunting trip, the men with gun, the dogs, the sudden entrance through the window. If you see, they have been highlighted across the paragraphs also. It almost keeps like the start of the action scene, and they latch
Mm.
upon that excitement and label the story as adventurous. But again, that's a setting detail. The hunting scene is not moving the story forward, it's the backdrop. So students have been choosing irony and reacting to the surprising ending or looking at the dramatic entrance, but students have also gone for or opted for options like D. Now, this is interesting because the entire niche story sounds very extreme. That men's were drowning and there was a tragic accident. It feels dramatic, almost over the top. So, students may think that this is clearly exaggerating. But again, this is the technique. It is helping the answer, but ultimately, the students' diversity in responses help us explain that they are using different strategies to answer this question. Now, let us understand from Madhurima what level of misconception these responses stem from.
Thank you, Pooja. So, like Pooja explained, across all three options, we see the same pattern. All of these ideas, like even how the teachers responded, because all of these ideas, they do exist in the text, but they are not what the author is using to construct the plot, right? To build the plot, to move the plot forward. So, students are picking on the visible features and the events, but they're not stepping back to think about the structure of the story or what exactly the question is asking. They're not stepping back to think, okay, to the story of the whole. They're focusing on like bits and pieces, maybe the imagery of it or the lie that the niece told. So bits and pieces of it, but not the story as a whole. They're not focusing on that. So this tells us that this isn't a misunderstanding of the story itself. It's a very literal reading that has not quite moved into the author's craft, which is why this question reveals a level 2 misconception where students can follow the story, they can tell you, they can summarize the story for you, but they cannot, they're not like they're struggling to connect these tiny details to the big picture or to the author's purpose and do a deeper analysis of the organizational ideas. Okay, Amazing. So let's look at our final example, which is a grade 9 reading comprehension question based on the passage, A Bushel of Learning, right? So the skill that is being assessed here is identifying the main idea and purpose of the passage. The passage is not very plot driven. It presents a conversation between adults who are discussing how a boy called Jerry should be educated. So different characters in the text have like different opinions, and they're putting forward different views. Somebody saying he should have a formal education, somebody saying no, he should learn practical skills like dancing or like sailing, and somebody saying, he should learn based on what interests him. And the passage is basically showing that how they're debating on what they believe is best for Jerry, right? The question is asking a very simple question, which is what is the main idea of the passage, right? And students were given four options. I will allow you some time to go through the options while quickly also reading them out. So the first is it outlines the struggles of a family with traditions and social pressures. Second is it proposes an alternative to traditional method of acquiring knowledge. The third is it shows how people can be torn apart by differences of opinion and prejudices. And option D is it presents a group of people trying to find a solution to what they think is a crisis, right? Now, what is the correct answer here? Let's see. The correct answer is option D. Very simple. The passage is not arguing for one single approach of education. Nobody is being torn about. It's a very jolly, lively discussion. It just shows a group of adults reacting to a situation they believe needs fixing. And each of them, they're offering their own solution, right? So, let's look at the data of what students selected. So, 37% out of like 100, only 37% student selected option D. What did the, where did, so what option did a lot of the other students select? Option B, which is it proposes an alternative to traditional methods of acquiring knowledge. And option C, it shows how people can be torn apart by differences of opinions and prejudices. Okay, can we have the second poll here? And based on the data, what do you think? What level of misconception do you think students are showing here? Like students who have selected option B and C, what level of misconception do you think students are showing here? We'll take another 45-ish seconds to answer. Great. So we have around 10% who have selected option level one, which is applying prior knowledge. Around 31% have selected literal comprehension, and about 60%, majority of you, have selected level three, which is incorrect conclusion slash overgeneralization or incorrect analysis, right? Great. So I think we kind of understand, right? So this here also, they're not uh, based on like the data even. You're kind of right. They are focusing on incorrect details in the text to answer the question. Here, like in this section, we are saying, I think it's essential that he learns what it is. Just give me 1 minute. So let's look at option B, right? So it's been chosen by around 27% of students. And this option isn't completely off, right? But students choosing it are clearly picking up on the discussion about the non-traditional learning, sailing, shooting, learning through interest. But they stop there. What they miss is that the passage isn't proposing a solution. It's presenting multiple viewpoints, right? So students are drawing a conclusion that the text itself fully never makes. Then we have option C, which says that, that these people are torn apart, and it has been selected by just under 20% of students. And it shows how people, students here, they're noticing the disagreement, but then they stretch it further than the text supports. The discussion is lively and opinionated, but it doesn't actually show relationships being torn apart or breaking down. So, in both cases, students are identifying real elements in the text, but then pushing those elements too far when deciding on what the main idea is, right? So, this places this question at these selections at as 60% of you selected level 3. So, in option B, there's an incorrect conclusion that is happening, and for option C, students are overgeneralizing what they already were parts from the text. Okay. So, we have been looking at different kinds of errors that students make, right? And we have categorized them as level 1, 2, or 3. But that brings up an important question. How do we know for sure which level is it? To figure that out, we need more than just the data for the selected option. We need to step into students' thinking. And that's exactly what the next section is going to be about, right? The tools that we use to get those insights. Pooja, would you like to take us through?
Sure. Thank you. So, in order to understand which errors, where does the errors lie, I think one of the effective ways that we have at AI have been doing is student interviews, where we pose questions and ask students to think aloud. We give them real-time glimpse into, it gives us a real-time glimpse into their reasoning. So, I think Faiz will be sharing some resources where we have done student interviews on YouTube. You can go through them and you can use that as a template. Then there are also other use of free response questions where you can ask the students to explain that why were they thinking, what were they thinking when they selected this answer. So this also helps us surface what error has the students been thinking of. Also, we also have lot of classroom observations that can also help you understand that what students, because you can hear it when students are discussing with the peers, the statements that they pass, that what were they thinking. So that gives you a live interaction into what students' mind is. And finally, we also have some research and teacher blogs where researchers have studied it and have tried to understand that at this age, what do students really think of? So, again, we have some blogs around that. Again, we will be sharing it in the chat box. Please feel free to use those blogs, read those blogs, because they give you an insight into how students think. So, these blogs are Reading Rockets, Cambridge English, Reading Universe. All these are there if you can share these. Hmm. So these are some of the resources. Now let's move to our next section of grammar, Madhurima.
Yes. So, our next section is grammar. Grammar questions might seem a little more black and white than comprehension, but students still make a range of interesting errors here too, right? Now, sometimes grammar errors is about incomplete understanding of rules. Sometimes it's just confusion about the many exceptions that grammar has, right? And occasionally it's just habits or overcorrection. So, before we move on to exploring the next section, let's do another quick poll, right? Can we have the third poll on the screen? So, you'll find a question on your screen. Please answer the grammar question as your students would. Uh, the question is basically, um,
Can't see the poll.
mm, yeah, can we please have the third poll? Yes. So fill in the blank with the correct word. The sentence is each of the players dash responsible for bringing their own equipment. And the first option is are, and the second option is. So select what you think your students would select. We'll take around 45-ish seconds.
Right. Thank you, teachers. But students wouldn't have gone this way, right? They would have selected R because they would have seen the word players first, and that would sound correct for them. And in grammar, that's exactly what happens. That students like to see the words which sound correct because it's more concept based. Students often rely on what sounds right rather than analyzing the entire structure of the sentence. And especially when it comes to subject verb agreement, they would like to see the closest noun instead of the entire subject. At times, the challenges from the incorrect understanding of rule. For example, so now we will be looking at some of the sources of misconceptions within the English language. Sorry, English grammar. So these are the three sources of misconception because, as we've discussed, it is more conceptual in nature. So one is incorrect understanding, second is incomplete understanding of the concept, and the third is they do not have the foundational concept by itself. What do we mean by this? In the very first case, let's say when they have incorrect understanding, is when students think that they have to use the words like, when they learn the words like articles, they think it is A, E, I, O, U as the word that needs to be where they have to use an over there. And they forget it's about the sound. The root depends on sound and not the letter. So that's their incorrect understanding. When we talk about incomplete understanding, that is when students when we ask them to change the in from direct to indirect the tenses, they might remember that they have to change the verb over there. They might remember that they have to remove the commas, but they might forget that they may have to change the time expression also. So that becomes incomplete understanding. And when we talk about the foundational concepts not fully established, is they might have learned certain concepts of countable, uncountable in previous classes, but when it comes to be worked together in a new concept, we often see students forget that. So when we ask them to use it with people, so they might use much people or many furniture, because again what they're forgetting is where they have to use the concept of countable and uncountable noun also. So now this is where the foundational concepts were not fully established along with the new concept that they learned. So that is some errors that students do in grammar. So we will now focus and work on what errors did class 7 to 10 students do in EI asset, and we'll take you through those questions. I'll show you now grade 8 question, which focuses on preposition, specifically how we describe the distance in a sentence. So if you see this question, we are focusing on the very first part of it. The first line says, Madhurima, can you read the question, please?
Yes. So the line that students have to complete, it says that so the first paragraph is Cody Thunder Law, a rookie from the Harlem Globetrotters basketball team, broke the Guinness World Record for the longest successful basketball shot. He broke the record dash, and they have to finish the sentence. Which of these correctly completes one? And the options are from a shot of 33.45 meters away, with a shot of 33.45 meters away, with a shot of 33.45 meters, and from a shot of 33.45 meters, right?
Yes. So the correct answer here is option C, the short of 33.45 meters. Now, can we launch another poll asking teachers to guess what the students would have answered? Teachers, we would like to know. I think we can close the poll. Yes. So teachers have said that probably students would have been confused with A and B option. Can we see the results?
Mhm.
And they're right. Teachers are absolutely right. They know the students very well. So
Mhm.
students who have gone with option A, here the problem is that here the use of from. So they have not used the right kind of preposition itself. So the
Mhm.
problem stand is when they see the word the world record has been broken, they thought it is all about the action describing which led to the breaking of record, and as a result they have used the word from, which does not align in the context. So here this is an incorrect grammar use. Also, if we see, there are students who have gone with option B. Now, 38% of students have gone over there also. Here, actually, they have chosen the correct preposition, but they have added the word away, the last one. This suggests that they feel that the distant needs an extra word to complete the sound because he has won the world record. They feel it is important for them to show the measurement, and that is why it's the incomplete knowledge of the structure in the preposition sentence. So while in option C, what we see, sorry, in option A, we see that students have gone for wrong preposition. The students who have gone with option B are using the incorrect sentence structure in the with the right choice of prepositions. So now, once you have established that what kind of mistakes students have done, you can help the students understand that. Now let's go to the next question from grade 10. And in this question, we have asked students to look at the verb tense and also the possessives. And that's very important. Madhurima, can you take us through the question, please?
Yes. So here, oh, sorry. Here we have the question is asking us to correctly complete blank number two. Let's read blank number two. A small countryside bakery in Western Japan dash iPhone cookie, a handmade chocolate biscuit decorated with colorful edible application icons. And the options are enjoys a surprise hit with it apostrophe S, will enjoy a surprise hit with its, where its apostrophe, has enjoyed a surprise hit with its, and has been enjoying a surprise hit with it. So these are the four options.
Can we see the responses? How did the students respond to this? The right answer is C. Of course, we
Yeah.
all know that. So if we see, now we have one question, one option, which is option A, which becomes our major misconception. Because most of the students have gone there and it's more than what students have opted for the correct answer. So if 31% students have answered it correctly, about 35% students have answered it incorrectly. I think what is important for the teachers to see here is the it's that they have gone for, how they're reading it. It has to be read as it is. By grade 10, we expect students to distinguish between the apostrophes. However, what is also important to see is the tense. We need to understand that this bakery became very famous in Japan, not only because of the new cookie, and this is something that is happening. So the tense that is in continuation. However, students think that this has happened just now. They do not understand the timeline over here. At grade 10 level, I think we start doing it from 6, but at 10 level also we see that students have missed on this part where where they had to read the instant hit that they have got or a surprise which was a clue for them. So students have missed on these parts. If they focus on this, they would have answered it correctly. So this is what we see in grammar. Uh, Now we can move towards vocabulary.
Yes.
And
So, okay, in vocabulary, there are two key skills we usually look at, right? So the first is the recall of synonyms or antonyms, and the second is the deduction of meaning in context. Now, it's very important to note that not all errors in vocabulary carry a misconception, right? If a student does not know a word, say they can't recall a synonym, that's just a gap in knowledge. There is no misconception happening there. But when it comes to like inferring the meaning using context, that's where we begin to see patterns in student thinking. And some of those patterns reveal clear misconceptions in the strategies that they're using to answer the question, right? So let's explore an example to see what that looks like. So here is a vocabulary question that focuses on understanding meaning in context, right? Students were asked to identify the meaning of the word admissions as it's used in sentence 6. I'll just quickly read out the sentence. It says, I have been at one time or another bored by so many snake complex admissions that as soon as the subject of reptiles crops up in conversation with anyone, I want to run away and hide. The options are to make a to make a statement accepting something, to admit someone into an institution, to pay money to enter an event, to make something official. And as we can see the data, um, the correct answer is option A, and 45% students have selected it, but 22%, 22.5% students have selected option B. What does option B say? To admit someone into an institution, right? Now, the meaning of admissions, to admit someone into an institution, is correct. That's a very common and familiar meaning of admissions, especially in a school context. So it's understandable why some students have, by default, answered this. So what they have done is students have not even read the passage. They have not read what how admission is being used in the sentence. Um, they have not tried to understand how the word is functioning in the context of the passage. They have simply read what is the meaning of admissions and they have selected what they know as the most common meaning of admissions, right? So here we see that students, there's no gap in knowledge. They know what admissions mean. They know that admissions means to admit someone into an institution. The issue is how they're using context to confirm the meaning. So instead of testing each option against the given context or sentence, they have just simply chosen the most familiar definition. So this is a good example of how vocabulary questions can reveal misconceptions, not about the word itself, but about the strategies that students are using to answer the question, right? So there are different types of strategies that one can use to build students' vocabulary skills. On your screen, you see here are some just like classroom exercises that teachers can follow to help students improve their everyday vocabulary. You can when they get a sentence, you break it down. When you look at it, you think about, okay, what can it mean? Is it a happy word? Is it a sad word? Hunting for clues in a given passage, substituting a word with another word from their own knowledge. I think one of the most basic and effective way is to introduce new words to students in like their natural surroundings. Use new words in conversations and encourage them to use synonyms, maybe when they are conversing with you. Another great way to build vocabulary naturally is through reading, right? And there's where this one exercise called DEAR, which is drop everything and read, that comes in. So what teachers do is, set aside a time, a dedicated time, when everyone, including students and teachers, they stop everything what they're doing and they just read. They pick up whatever closest material is there close to them and they just read it, right? So it's a very simple but powerful way to build a reading habit, which will in turn expose students to like new words in context, right? I just wanted to quickly ask, so teachers, are there some exercises that you do in your classroom settings to help student build vocabulary? You can use the Q&A box to just let us know, like, what are some things that you do to help your students build vocabulary?
Some teachers are saying they do use dear
Dear.
as an
Yeah,
exercise.
we use Dare. Amazing. Yeah. It's quite
They have
effective because it
there's a period called dear in their
ah
school.
great. Yeah. I think it makes reading like, like fun and spontaneous instead of like an assignment key, oh, you have to read now.
Idioms is another what teachers use.
Great.
Yes. So as we come to the close of the webinar, we would like to share some important updates. So ASSET has also evolved into a comprehensive ecosystem built on three interconnected strands. The first strand, of course, is where students go through the diagnostic test and we understand their student learning levels and bring up the misconceptions to light. The second strand is where we do the continuous teacher development. So there are these initiatives of webinars and learning summits. We will put it in there's there on the chat where you can find all the webinar details. If you've missed on some webinar, there are recordings also shared over there. Please feel free to catch them. There are also details are available on the EI website. We would welcome you to see the past webinars. Also, we'll encourage you to participate on the coming up webinars actively. The third strand is where we are sharing some high quality resources, asset questions, and additional learning materials. So, to sustain that ongoing practice in the classroom itself. So, we have some blogs, we have newsletters, we have teacher resources. Some misconception questions. Please feel free to filter them out, read them through. We would like an active engagement over there also. The next update that we have for you is that we have introduced an asset skill book, which is thoughtfully designed around the three instructional framework step, which is I do, we do, and you do. I think we follow it across all our subjects also. That in the I do phase, the teacher models how to do the questions, especially when we are talking about the competency based questions, and they demonstrate how that students can arrive at certain answers. The second phase being we do, where they get a guided practice where students and teachers work together and gradually build the understanding. And third is when students are have been independent to do the mastery and can do the questions by themselves. So please feel free to reach out to your EI representative. We have also shared the skill books over here for your reference. Also, we have shared one link. All these links are for the asset skill books. Please feel free to reach out and use them. And please share your feedback with us on these skill books. Your feedback is very important to us. Like the third change, which has come from most of your feedbacks, the teachers have told us that all the teacher my books used to have a few questions. They would like to see the detailed report of how do students answer on each question, and also all the questions with the answers. So now going forward, we have the skill book. You can just scan the OMR itself, and you can see all the questions and the responses of students and the data related to that. Now, we would request you, as we're closing the webinar, please scan this OMR code and share your feedback. You have been a very wonderful and interactive audience. Please share your feedback with us. We've also shared the feedback link in the chat with you. Can we have the chat feedback link also in the chat, please? Madhurima, teachers have shared one of the resource that they use in the classrooms.
Yes. I went through some of the like responses of how they are like, doing the vocabulary. They're very interesting,
Yeah.
um, and interactive and engaging exercises. Yes.
Thank you, teachers, for being there.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting. You have been a great audience, and hopefully, this you're taking something from the webinar, and you've been able to, like, we have been able to help you understand misconceptions a little better.
We are also taking some strategies.
Yes. Yes.
We'll give 2 minutes for teachers to fill in the feedback form.
Okay, I think we can close now.
Yes.